Hey there, welcome back to this week's episode of the Property Pulse. I'm your host, Lucas Bolahood of the Bolahood Group and Coldwell Banker RMR Real Estate, joined by my trusted lending colleague here, Alexandra Jobb with Legacy Lending. Alex, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
You've got that intro down pat, Luke.
But
Oh,
we've been
new and
doing it for a
exciting
while now,
things.
haven't we?
I know. New and exciting. So we had Bank of Canada hold. That was very anticipated, but that was great news on Wednesday. So no rate hikes, and as we've been talking about, we've seen that the fixed pricing has been dropping over the last few months, and there is anticipation that we may see the Bank of Canada reduce prime, the overnight lending rate there in the spring, or at least, well, let's see them do it by the summer, right?
I think that's a lot we've been hoping for. By the middle of this year, we'd see rates start to drop
Yes.
and affordability improve a bit. And we're often
Lots.
looking at when you're looking at or hoping to project what's going to happen with the Bank of Canada, we're looking at things like the bond rates, whether, the different types of bonds they have in the government of Canada. And those were trending down through the end of last year, but it seems like they've started to take a bit of an uptick, right? So it's a little
Except
bit
for those
uncertain that
blips.
way.
Yes, and I wanted to mention that although we're anticipating rates to come down in 2024 and 2025, it doesn't mean that it's a straight drop, right? There can be bumps along the way, and that's something to be mindful of. And just talk to your mortgage broker about, what's the best deal, and what's the best rate, and should you be locking something in if you're in the market to buy. And with that being said, I know we wanted to touch on the topic of buyers today and how to advise them, in a market like today.
Well, oh, absolutely. The buyers have been on the fence for a large part of 2023. Just the cost of borrowing has increased so much, and many people are in that situation. But as the calendar's turned over, we've actually seen a lot more engagement amongst buyers. Not as many transactions so far in January as maybe we would have anticipated. We're actually trending to be, I would say close to on par with where we were in December. December, there were 468 sales. As I checked the numbers this morning, we had a little over 400 firm transactions in Durham region with another 115 still conditional. We've only got 5 days left in the month here. So, we're probably going to be under the 500 sale mark. And inventory has increased where we were at, I think 472 new listings last month, and inventory was around 860 something at the end of the year. We've got over 1,100 listings currently on the market. So
Hmm.
we're still in a seller's market, but a weaker one. And I do anticipate that is likely going to change.
Yeah.
But one of the
That's
things
true.
we've really started to notice is multiple offers are coming back, and
Right.
offer presentation dates are much more prevalent. And today I want to touch a little bit on what to do in that situation if you are a buyer in multiple offers. And another new thing that's come into play with this new legislation from TRESA, with this taking effect which took effect December 1st of 2023, is the Trust in Real Estate Act. I think I've got that acronym right. And this new approach that sellers can elect to use is open offers, and
Right. I've heard about this.
essentially disclosing different terms that are involved that are in other offers, so that they're considering. And actually how this works, it's on the listing brokerage, the listing agent working with the seller to manage that whole process, which could get a little tricky. And essentially, like, a seller can choose to disclose whichever terms they want within of an offer to all the other parties that are involved, and they can actually elect to disclose those things in the middle of the process, or they can change
Wow. They
that
can change it.
direction.
So this is
Yeah.
up to the
So.
seller. This is up to the
Mhm.
seller, and they're going to have communication with their agent to say, I want to expose, like we're talking about a multiple offer situation where the seller says, I've got four offers. I want to expose everyone's offer to one another. And does it have to be just, it has to be disclosed to the buyers, correct?
Yes, and they can choose which terms they want to disclose. For example, they could say, well, let's disclose the price, the
Uh-huh.
conditions, and the closing date. Because, we
Wow.
want to have there's certain criteria that we have established as that we would designate as being a preferred offer or preferred terms within an offer. So, we essentially can outline what those terms are and say to all the other buyers, we're going to be disclosing all of these terms that are important to us within your offers, and you can decide if you want to
So
make changes
interesting.
to those terms. But the thing it's kind of that will be challenging is, what if the buyer doesn't want to have their terms disclosed?
I know.
You know,
So can
right?
they argue that or just say, then no, we aren't participating
We've
or
we've had some discussions with legal counsel in our office, certainly around, how would you draft a particular clause if and include that in your offer if your client does not want to have the terms of their offer disclosed. And we've essentially
Mhm,
determined that if you were to include a clause in your offer that says if the seller, just in brief terms here, but if the
mhm.
seller elects to disclose terms of the offer, our offer as a result is null and void and hence withdrawn
Okay.
from the process. So like,
Mhm.
now without getting into the legalese of the terminology, that's essentially what, what we've been advised of as a possibility that you can include. And like it's interesting because the seller, even though if from that previous example, the seller is going to disclose price, conditions, and closing, they can change
Yeah.
their mind and say, actually, we only want to disclose conditions and closing date, not price anymore. So
Mhm,
there's some gray area right now out there in terms of how this procedure should be facilitated.
mhm.
And at this point, it is up to the individual listing agent in their brokerage to manage that process. And brokerage A to brokerage B might do it completely differently, which might cause some frustrations for buyers. But it's going to take some time, I think, for everyone
It's
to
just
learn how this process should
yeah,
work most efficiently.
it's kind of complex, but I have to say, there's sometimes buyers, they go, "Oh my God, it went for just $10,000 more than what our offer was." In the end, like later they see the sale price and they go, "Shoot, I wish I would have, or I would have paid, or I wish I would have come up a little higher." So
Well,
bringing that point
absolutely.
in,
Absolutely.
it,
Imagine that, right? Like
yeah,
if, we have that fear when we're in, as of right now, you don't disclose terms. It's blind bidding, as they call
yep,
it. And people are afraid to overpay for the house,
I
right?
know.
My
Hmm.
offer was 875. There was another one that was at 900. I would have paid 910,
Yes.
but I didn't know what those terms were, so I
Okay.
didn't, right? So imagine like, okay, well, I would have paid more than that other person. And if that other, and
If
the buyer B
I would have
knew
won,
what I was going to pay, maybe they would have, like, so it can actually, even though
what does
it
this
might
generate?
feel like you're not, the seller's thinking like, well, I don't have any advantage, I'm losing an advantage of having people bid up for the house. Well, it's like, well, actually, you could be missing out on someone who would pay more if
That's right.
you disclose those terms.
I think
And then
so.
again, people don't feel like they're overpaying for the house either because they know that they were the best offer, right?
Yes.
And so there are definitely some advantages or benefits to sellers in that situation, but it's going to take some time for people to get used to that process. And again, us as agents and at brokerages alike, we have to try and standardize that process and make it as again a positive experience for buyers as well. Because you do run the risk of, if buyers don't want to have their terms disclosed and you've indicated on your listing that you're going to disclose terms of offers or competing offers, they might not offer altogether.
Hmm.
So there's a bit of a catch-22 risk and reward that could be at play until people consumers get accustomed with this process that they have the option of utilizing.
Right. So I think that if you are going to be a buyer in this market, there's something that, wouldn't have happened in the past, but you may run up against that this time around or in 2024. But with that being said, it's so important to work with your mortgage agent to know like what you're comfortable, go over the budget. What's your I mean, sometimes clients come to me, they've already bought, right? We know we're already there. But if we're just planning, the stage of planning, it's like know your budget and then know your top end because you might be playing in that and go, "Oh, I wish I would have paid more or I could have paid more." It's good to know where you'd like to buy and how high can you go, right? With your down payment funds or with a cosigner or a guarantor, what buffer do we have? Because the last thing you want to see is that dream home slip away because you could have gone higher, but you didn't put your best foot forward.
Well, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned that cosigner guarantor piece because, we have so many first-time buyers, whether they're a new Canadian coming into Canada or they're, someone just, trying to start their life and buy their first home, get out of renting and paying someone else's mortgage. like what's the first step in the process is, for me anyway, certainly is, let's get pre-approved. Let's know what
Right.
budget we're working with, because it's really hard to go shopping blind. And we'll talk about this. I want to talk about this more too, about how to best position yourself if you're in multiple offers as a buyer to be successful, when you're in multiple offers. But what's the process entail, if you can maybe highlight for
Sure.
those who might not be familiar, what's the process of getting a pre-approval? What documents do you need? How long does this kind of stuff take? And
Documents,
what are the
documents,
differences?
documents. So some, information's one thing and then documents are another. And clients should know that it is a lot of documents. I mean, especially if you're self-employed, okay? And it depends kind of how your business is structured. Let's talk about self-employed for a second. It depends on how your business is structured, whether you're sole proprietor, or you are a corporation. If you're a corporation, we're going to look for the articles of incorp. Generally, we want to see 2-year history. And then sometimes it can be, and again, depending on that client, depending on the down payment, depending on the structure, we can be looking for bank statements from your business bank account. Let me tell you something too, because we ran into this not long ago on our team. If you are operating a business, please open a business account. Don't run it through your personal account. We have seen that. It gets messy. It gets confusing. We want a separate business banking account for the business transactions, your income and your expenses to come out of there. We have bank statement programs where we specifically look at that to qualify clients for income minus, money in minus your expenses. You got a truck payment? Do you have any employees? Are you paying rent? What kind of business is it? How long have you been operating? Tax returns. Again, sometimes this is for standard qualifications. And if we're looking to alternative lending options, we don't necessarily need the tax return, but it is a good thing to have completed with your accountant, whether you are self-employed or an employee of. Okay, get those tax return files, because you don't want the lender asking for a notice of assessment from 2022. We are now in 2024, and you don't have that notice of assessment complete, right? So income docs are huge. It's pretty standard when you see a client that is salary T4, okay? So we're looking always for an employment letter and pay stub. But again, we can get asked for bank statements for even a salaried employee to see that paycheck, that money is going into your bank account, direct deposit. Okay, so clients can get a little bit like, you're asking a lot of questions, you're asking for a lot of documents, but that is standard practice, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's been situations, and this is important, like fraud,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
There's a reason that the lenders and banks take all these procedures into consideration, because I mean there were articles with CBC Marketplace in the last 2 years about mortgage fraud and people being caught,
Yeah.
forging documents and things. So
Yes.
these checks and balances are in place for a reason, and obviously that's why it's there, and just making sure everyone can afford to pay. And you talk about like the stress tests and those kind of things too, making sure you can afford the home that you're buying, right? And it's really important.
Absolutely. I'll touch one other thing on a pre-approval, or when it comes to actually like getting the approval in place at the time of purchase, we're going to want that transaction history on down payment availability as well. So generally that's 90-day history on funds, whether that's in your investments, in your bank account. And a lot of times our buyers have gifts from family, immediate family. So if you've got money coming from grandma or parents or your sibling or a stepdad, whoever, we're going to want to see a gift letter signed for those funds to ensure that they're not borrowed, that it is non-repayable. And then we want to see it come into your bank account at some point too,
You
right?
want to
So
see
that
that actual
transaction gets
receipt of the
automatic.
deposit.
Exactly. So again, a lot of documents to be verified in the process.
Well, and I mean, there's certainly those similar checks and balances in my sphere too, when you're dealing with the delivery of a deposit, and any fund
Sure.
over $10,000 or
Yeah.
more has to be reported. And again, so we're asking people for copies of IDs and things like that,
Yeah.
verifying identity and doing some research on the back end. There's a
Just
lot of
doing our job.
paperwork that goes in the back end of this kind of stuff, but it's important because again, we're dealing with large sums of money, and a lot is on the line, and that's why we're doing all this due diligence and have these safety or these safe gaps in place, right? So it's
Of
really
course.
important, and that pre-approval is a super important part in the first step, towards buying a home. There's not all that many cash buyers out there. So this is something that people should understand
Yeah,
what the process includes. And
absolutely.
jumping back to where we were at earlier about the multiple offers being re-entering the marketplace, this uh, approach of underpricing a home, and really you can never underprice a property. It should, the high water mark should always find its level in terms of what the value of the property should be. But
Sure.
that approach is when you're underpricing a home and you're hosting an offer presentation date where the seller should have a written direction that says they're
Mhm.
not going to look at any offers until a defined date. A lot of times we will see that they'll look at a quote unquote preemptive offer as part of the process. But the idea there is when you've underpriced the property, you're trying to bring as many buyers through the home as you can in advance of that offer date. And the
Mhm.
idea is, or the hope from the listing side is that you're going to see multiple offers registered on the property. And when you're in the seller in that situation is trying to, have those competing buyers essentially bid up the price of the home, talking about the
Of course.
multiple offer situation and open offers and disclosing terms. So that's the approach that they're going with. Now, if you're not in a situation where there's disclosed terms and it is a blind bidding process, there's a few things that a buyer needs to prepare for and have, certainly talk through and discuss what you're going to do. So a couple things first, like an underpriced home does not demonstrate the current market value of the property. So if it's
Right.
listed at 599, the probable market value based on similar homes that recently sold in the area that are in similar condition and within a reasonable period of time, in that particular neighborhood, may have been selling in the $700,000 range. So, an offer is being in multiple offers and submitting an offer under asking because the homes are selling at 99% of the list price. So to offer, 580 for that 599 home is not likely going to be successful, right? So you need to really have a good understanding of what has sold in the area that is comparable in relative recent period of time.
And I know
That's
that when
thing number one.
you take that information with your buyer, if you are going to present an offer and it is, you know, less than what they were expecting, I know that you do the research and kind of gather the information on recent sales so that when you present it, there's reasonability. You're justifying your price, right? By saying, look, this is what we use as comparables. I've seen you do that before, and I think that's wonderful because you're not just going, oh, well, my clients would really like it for this price. It is where is this price coming from? It's an educated presentation,
Well,
right?
and that's part of my job as well. If you're my buyer client, and I'm going to make sure that we've explored all the different potentially comparable properties that have sold in the area. Again, we're looking at things like price, condition, how long ago was the sale, and do we find that there's some similarities there? And then, because I don't want to set you up for failure thinking, well, this house is listed for 599. Maybe I can get it for 610,000 when all the other comparable sales are selling for 7, right?
Hmm.
So you're going in there with an informed understanding of what the likely market value of the property is.
Yeah,
But to take it a step further, because we have an idea of and I'll have that conversation with the agent, sometimes they might think that their house is similar to
sure.
$800,000 properties, right? So when we
That's
have a difference of
negotiation,
opinion
right?
there, that's part
Difference
of the
of opinion.
negotiation. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
But
like
as
that you're
a,
not afraid to do that. But just give that information to your clients, the sellers, and the agent. You've got kind of everyone working together to get your clients the best price, right?
Mhm.
Or justified.
So when you're looking at, and
The
again,
right
when you've
price.
taken all those sales and you've looked at it and said, okay, this is our valuation where we think the probable market value for this home is, and we've written our offer to reflect that. You do want to have a walk away number in your head.
Sure.
Sort of, here's within the range that we've established as a likely market value. We might not come in at the top of that valuation in that range, but we're going to be somewhere in the middle. And if we get to that point where it's like, oh no, we value the property at maximum 725, and there's another offer that could be for more. Now we don't know that because again, they haven't disclosed the terms. It's a blind situation, but
Say
you're going to
I'm
make
done,
that,
right?
yeah, you're going to say, well, full stop. We're not doing
Yeah.
this, right? We're gonna let it go for more than 725. And as long as you're comfortable in that,
Yes.
you're okay, right?
Even if
You're
you're
not gonna be in a
pre-approved,
situation you're overspending, or you feel like,
right?
maybe we should have offered that a little bit more. And I mean, you could feel that the next day when you find out that maybe there was something that you might have jumped up on, or you could have maybe
But
reached
it's got to
to.
stop somewhere,
But
right?
you
It's
have
got to
to
stop
you have to
somewhere.
have that line where it's like, no, this is my walk away number. If they
Yes.
get past that, I'm good with it going to another
Even if you
buyer.
were pre-qualified for something, higher,
Hmm.
just know there's other properties out there too. So sometimes it's like, okay, we just know we're not going for that because of the work that it needs, or because of, that we're just willing to go look somewhere else, or if we're not desperate, we're not overpaying, all of those reasons, that's our max
The
for that
old
property.
adage, rule of thumb I've grown up with in terms of buying real estate is you make your money on the buy. So,
Mm,
if you buy it at a price that maybe it's at market value, but you buy a property, and hopefully you're going to make improvements to that property, and through time the value is going to increase. You're going to obviously pay down that mortgage, so you're accruing equity. Like, that's how you make the money on it. If you like it's challenging for a number of people who bought during the peak of the market in the last couple of
yes.
years, because they've paid a what today feels like a very an inflated price for their home,
Hmm.
because prices have come down. It's going to take them that much longer to, in theory, make a profit on that initial investment that they
Yeah.
made, right? Because
Yeah.
they paid a peak price at a peak time in the market. Now, not to say it was a bad decision. I can't speak to that, but it is just going to take that much longer for
Take
you to
longer.
make the
Yeah,
money back, right? So
that's right.
if you've bought it on a low end, or let's say you bought low and sell high, right? That's always the idea. So
Hopefully the
if
people
you
that
don't want
bought
to
high,
overpay for a home, have that walk away number
yeah.
based on being informed from the other sales in the area. And if the market value for range for the home is at 725, paying 750 is going to take you an extra 5 years to, or what have you, to wait for the market to exceed that valuation. It's going to take you that much longer to make the money back, kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, so between being pre-approved, knowing the comps in the area, and having that sort of drop dead walk away number in your mind, and things as well, and this is a tactic that's been used for years, but writing a letter to the seller,
Yes.
sharing a little bit more context about yourself and your situation, and why this particular property is the right one for you. And
Yes.
that could
I've
separate,
heard
it
of
can make
that
a
working.
positive impression. It certainly does. It
Yeah.
can make a good impression on the seller. It might pull on the heartstrings, and maybe they relate to it a little bit better than they might to maybe an investor offer, something like that.
Yes, that's right.
So,
Sometimes people want, like I know of a story, they were selling a home and it's been in the family for a long time, and they didn't want to see the house like knocked down and something, new being built there. And that mattered to them for whatever reason. They're walking away from it, but there was just this legacy. There's my word, legacy, that, that they wanted to see a first time home buyer come along and love the home like they did, and sure, improve it, but not knock it down. There are sentimental, even when you're selling, that they're like, hey, I don't want this to just go to anyone. I don't want to
mhm.
see this be a rental property and have tenants in it. And we love our neighbors and we want to see a young family buy it, or a couple with kids, or whatever. Sometimes that matters, right? So if you paint that picture when you're that buyer, sometimes
Yeah.
that helps.
Absolutely. Like, I'm always going to make the phone call to to that listing agent in advance of submitting an offer. I want to learn a little bit about the sellers. Obviously share a little bit about my buyer clients, and try and create some synergy there, and see if we can find some common ground,
Yes, it
that
helps.
we can work with. And, it doesn't always work that way, right? Like, real estate is an emotional decision. Sometimes people are really, I'll say, good at removing emotion from the decision, but it is an emotional decision. So there's emotion at play there. And if you can try and speak to those emotions and feelings and try and connect to them, then it does improve your chances of having a successful transaction. So I think
Does
that's one that you can utilize, and it doesn't always work, but it can
I was gonna
certainly
say,
make
does
a
begging
difference.
work? Does begging work? The please, please, please sell it to me? Not normally, eh?
Oh, I don't know if I want to stoop down to that level, but we certainly have other things we can
You
tap
have other
into. But
tactics. For sure.
But yeah, I think, you know, if I'm, that's sort of my standard conversation when I deal with any buyer, whether you're a first time or you're experienced going into multiple offers. And I do think we're going to see more of that, because, you know, homes are taking longer to sell. Prices are a little bit all over the place in terms of what a seller is willing to consider letting their home go for and what a buyer can pay. You know, even if rates do come down middle of the year, maybe it's only a quarter point. I don't know how much that's going to really affect the people's borrowing power, and if it's going to push prices up that much more. But you know, we are going to see a lot of, I do anticipate a lot of competition throughout this year, just given the demand and the pent up demand that
Yeah.
we have in Canada for homes, and the deficit we have of available homes, new home
Availability, yeah.
construction,
Yeah,
right?
new
So
starts,
that's going
high
to create a bit of a
population,
storm.
yeah, high immigration and not enough homes here. That is
Yeah,
like the main
exactly.
topic of this year. And
Yeah,
here
well,
we are.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but like in 2022, because I was going off 20, this is in 2023 where I heard this. It was like two-thirds of new construction projects were being delayed or canceled in like across Canada. Maybe that number is too high, maybe it's but you know, there was a large segment of new construction that just because of borrowing and carrying costs and red tape and stuff like that, that they weren't completing the projects. I've also heard a lot and read a lot on buyers of pre-construction walking away from their deposits because,
Mhm.
you know, the project took too long to complete, their
Yeah.
rate holds had expired with their lenders, and then they can no longer qualify to buy the house
Qualify.
based on their
I
initial
know you
price,
are
and they're
seeing
walking
that.
away from thousands and thousands of dollars in deposits that they put down on
We
those
heard
homes.
the
So
same. I
there's
know.
some volatility there still, but you know, I think people just need to make sure that they're making well-informed decisions and that they're working with people that are acting in their best interest, not in their own.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else we need to touch on today, Alex? I know we've got through
We
quite a
could go
bit
off
here
there.
going through this, but we
We could
bit
talk
off a
all
lot
day.
today. We probably could, but that'll keep people too long. Well, awesome. Well, we'll be back again soon. I'm not, is the next rate announcement in February? We're looking at early March.
I think we're in March. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've got
it's
to
like
look
first
that
week of
up.
March or something. That's what I would anticipate, I would think too. But anyway, I haven't checked that. Nonetheless, it's been great catching up with you here this week, Alex. If anyone has any questions for Alex looking to get a pre-approval or refinance, certainly you'll find her contact information at the end of this video here, and you'll find mine as well if you've got any questions about what's going on in your neighborhood. Be happy to help you then. So with that, feel free to follow along, leave a comment, or reach out directly if you have any questions, and we'll be with you again soon. So until next time, bye for now.